So people ask me what it takes to be successful. I'm like, you have to be adaptable. That's the most important quality. So you need to pivot, move with the times. I think loneliness is an absence of authenticity. I don't actually believe loneliness exists. How could we be lonely when there's millions of people around us at all times? It's an internal experience of isolation. And what loneliness is an isolation of self that's been exiled, which is our authentic and true self. I wish everyone would get this. It's like, even if you hurt someone, it's usually out of a place of unconsciousness, because if you were conscious, you wouldn't do it, but you need to hurt someone to become conscious so you don't do it again. You look at relationships now, they're more toxic and they're worse than they've ever been. The nature of our relational capacity at the moment is terrible. It's horrible. It's a bunch of childlike adults that are therapists saying that we should keep reinforcing childlike psychology.
What do we all want? Like, what's on the other side of all the personal development, all the books, all the courses, all of the internal work? Like, what is the thing that we're chasing on the other side of that?
I can only answer for me and what I've seen with all the people I worked with. What people want is...
So this is an episode that I've wanted to record for so long. And before I even came up with the idea of the founder's journey, this was in my head. I had the questions that I wanted to ask, and it really, really delivered. And when I created this podcast, I kind of speak about it around how the life of a founder and the life of someone in business and entrepreneurship is the life of a human being. And it is as much of a personal development journey as it is a business journey. And the stuff that we talk about in this conversation is the epitome of the levels and the depth of work that is required to become the person that we want to be. Even as I sit here thinking about the conversation, it gives me goosebumps, because the information that Jag shares in this podcast is information that you will not hear anywhere else. It potentially is information that you're not going to like to hear. It may trigger some people, so I will put that out there. But for the people who are ready to hear what this conversation has inside, get ready. I'm not even going to explain what to expect or what's inside. Either you listen to it or you don't. But if you are sticking around, let the journey begin. So I don't think that there's anyone who does what you do, or anyone that does it the way that you do. So I remember the first session that we did together, which I actually watched about 4 weeks ago. I've watched that now 4 times, and I picked up on stuff when I watched it recently that I didn't even pick up before.
Yeah.
And so I continue just to pick up on stuff that we did. And it's changed my life in so many ways. So for that, I'm grateful.
Appreciate
to start.
it, bro.
To
Thank
start.
you.
But one thing I've always found hard is to explain to others what you do. and I think that's probably a common theme. So what do you do?
Man, even I still have trouble explaining what I do, because, we've got a lot of explain it in one sentence kind of stuff. But I guess what I could say that I do is I use language to access parts of the psyche that people aren't aware of, to help them individuate and separate from the false self into their true self and resolve their painful subconscious psychological conflicts. And that could look like anything from you were in one of my sessions yesterday where I was teaching about how people use language to split internally. So that's a part of it. It might be why someone's doing something. It could be a program that someone's stuck in. It might be a negative emotional addiction that someone has. There's and you've seen now, because you've seen me in Masculinity and Heal, Dissolve, Expand, which is a one-on-one group therapy I do, in one-on-one stuff, in mentoring, in the fundamentals of the psychological human condition, in the prisons program. Like, there's so much stuff to it that it's not really easy for me to delineate it into one thing, except what I've discovered is that I help people through the individuation process. And the individuation process is to separate from the mother and father and to become whole.
I want to go back, because the work that we've done together and just watching your journey and just hearing you across lots of different platforms, there's a lot of your journey that you've spoken about, but there's a lot of things that you skip over that I'm like, I need to know the answers to that.
Sure.
So take me back to the time where you became a therapist, or before then, what led you into the work that you're doing now?
So it kind of starts close enough to 10 years ago. I had an investment company, partying a lot, drug taking, sleeping with lots of women, all that sort of stuff, right? I mean, that's not an uncommon story either. It's nothing unique or special about it. That's a pain-driven embodiment of life. And so you don't do that stuff if you're living a good life. So I was making plenty of cash, had the life, so to speak, living in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, $3 million apartment, cars, clothes, watches, women, drugs, all the rest of it. And I just started to feel suffocated while I was in it. And I was like, I remember I'd done my place up, my apartment, and I put this, I don't even know what it's called, a trapezoid or something that I paid thousands of dollars for that was the size of a baseball or something stupid like that. And I was like, I put it down and I was like, oh, this isn't it. This isn't it. Like, I thought when I got my apartment finished, then I'd be happy. So then I went to Mercedes to buy a $400,000 car later that day. And I was like, that'll be it. And then I remember I was signing off on the papers. I didn't sign them. But this voice sort of appeared up here and said, like, where does this end? Where does it end? And then I'm like, what is it next? $1 million car? And then it's like, I can see like the consumerism aspect playing out. So I said, I need to figure something else out. And so I chose 5 things I was interested in at the time, which was jiu-jitsu, naturopathy, music, motorcycles, and tattooing. And I thought I'll use a process of elimination. At this point, I'd injured my right leg and broken my right leg at doing training jiu-jitsu. And I saw the people I was around were continuing down a path that I didn't want to be around. Heavy drug use, heavy objectification of women, lots of surface level behavior. And I was like, I'm not really there anymore. So I decided to move to New Zealand and exile myself to a farm over there. It was in the mountains in the North Island. And I was living on my own there. And I was reading a lot. I went through a pretty heavy, not a detox, I think that word's thrown around too much these days, but kind of like a spiritual detox, which was like a painful sort of emotional experience of isolation, loneliness, just facing myself. I really feel like, and we can talk about this a little later, but the war of our time as men is not storming the beaches in Gallipoli or anything like that. It's facing ourselves. And that's what I did over there, not knowing that this was going to lead to this. I had no idea. So anyway, I was reading a lot of books on consciousness, trauma, mystical experiences, shamanism, breathwork, religion, philosophy, all of that. And so I woke up one day and I was studying tattooing as well at the time because I'm covered in tattoos. And I thought, well, that's been in my life for 20 years. Why don't I just do that, So I started to draw, and I was always a really good artist, drawing and, creative like that. And I started to draw sculptures of Renaissance artwork. I just copy them and draw, and I could pretty much draw them almost identical freehand. So there was some skill I had with that. And anyway, I woke up one day and I was like, well, what am I reading? So I wrote out a list and I said, well, what am I good at? Which was, communication, talking, selling at the time. What do people come to me for? Which was advice in business or relationships. What comes to me naturally? What am I passionate about? And I looked at it and I was just like, I'm meant to be a therapist. And it was right there in front of me the whole time. So I moved from New Zealand back to Sydney. I studied a Bachelor of Integrative Psychotherapy. And then during that period, I realized the traditional models were not what I wanted to go into because it just wasn't deep enough. It was very rigid. It's very strict, unless I went all the way through to clinical psychology or psychiatry, which I don't want to diagnose people. I didn't want to be in the world of diagnosis or pharmaceuticals or anything like that. And so that kind of led me down to the path to go, well, kind of got to figure out what I want to do myself and how I want to help people myself. And that's where I started down that path and led me to be a coach.
Mm. Do you think there's a place for clinical psychology?
Yeah, I do. I think I sort of say if they were that effective, they wouldn't be around anymore because they would have healed the previous generation. But I also understand there's another side where people just need that. Some people do need medication. Their life is better for it. And I used to be a little bit harsher with it because there was a period of 6 months or 12 months where I was only working with people that were on medication, not looking at the medication, but I would dissolve what was going on in the mind and the medication wouldn't work or it wouldn't be required anymore after that. So I think there's a place for traditional therapy. Some people just need to be heard. Some people just need a space just to unload. Some people just want their feelings validated, and it's not up to me to say that that's not right for everyone. My work's definitely not for everyone, as you've seen. Like it's powerful and it cuts to the root, and not everyone's cut out to handle that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I do believe it has a very important place.
So back to New Zealand, because I've heard you talk about it, but then I kind of go, well, one, why did you choose that? Why did you choose New Zealand? And two, this is me making an assumption, but the past that you lived and where you kind of came from of, you know, the person who you were and in the world that you were, a very materialistic world, a very money driven, you know, like you said, the womanizing, the drug taking, generally that's coupled with someone who, one, doesn't want to look at themselves, but two, isn't open to that kind of work. So were you open to it, and what was that transition like?
So first one, why New Zealand? I just need to get out of Sydney. So it was either Tasmania, and then I discovered New Zealand. You could go live there without a visa or anything like that.
Right.
And so I was just like, well, let's just see where life wants to take me in this. Not really, actually, so it's not very accurate. I didn't say, I'll just see what life wants for me. I liked the idea of getting out of Sydney and being exiled in a place that wasn't close.
Right.
So a whole new country, like there's a whole body of water in between that. So I thought, I got to get as far away as possible where there's no distractions. In Tasmania, I'd been there a couple of times. I had my tattoo artist down there. Didn't vibe with the place. And so a place came up in New Zealand, a 3-bedroom house on a farm that has been built on 10 acres at the foot of the mountains. And I was like, I'll just see if I get it. And I got it. And so I was gone a week later. So that was the first part with that. Now, the funny thing is around the womanizing and all that, I've always been very introspective. You know, I was meditating when I was 19 or 20 and drinking green juices, and people like, that's black magic back then. You know, so I'm 42 now, turning 42, sorry. 22 years ago, for an 18, 19, 20-year-old to be involved in that was like, whoa, this dude's woo-woo as. And then now it's like meditation's an essential part of just your health, really.
Yeah.
So I was sort of pretty far ahead of the curve. And then, well, not far ahead of the curve, I was just more introspective. I wanted to know, like, what is this place? What am I doing here? Why are we living in a world that feels so uncomfortable to me? Like, I hated school. I hate authority. And not from hate's a strong word, but it doesn't vibe with me very well. I don't like people telling me what to do. I don't believe that another human being has any right to tell anyone else what to do. Okay, so I sort of looked at this from a perspective, and I was always quite introspective. And so I was in the space of looking at, you know, near-death experiences when I was pretty young. And then I started to study money. And actually, sorry, I started studying money first. Then I got into near-death experiences. These two things combined opened my consciousness big time. That's probably why I started taking drugs, amongst other reasons of growing up in a chaotic environment and seeking high-intensity experience or dangerous experiences, because I grew up in a dangerous environment. So that model was replicated through the drug taking, not because I didn't want to look at myself. Now, when I started studying money, I looked at the origins of it, then I started studying the fiat currency system, and then it hit me at 18 or something. I'm like, the finance industry is a scam. The money industry is a scam. This is infinite growth based on a finite system. This thing's a scam. Money's not even real. So this is at like 19, you know, you can see meditating, drinking green juices and saying the money system's a scam. Like, this dude's lost it.
Yeah.
You know? Like, it's like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm like, you know, even the deposit holdings of 10% or 3% of how much cash a bank needs to have in there, and like, I mean, I'm not the one to talk about that. There's heaps of people that have exposed that now, but it's a scam. Then I started studying near-death experiences and seeing like the repeat stories, and it just opened my consciousness up to like, where do we go after this? Like, do we endure? Do we continue? What's the point? So by the time it came around for me to exile myself out of the world, it's like, what I saw was I'd had this spiritual side to me, this curiosity, this introspective side. That was numbed out through materialism, drugs, sex, and everything else. I would actually say that was the part of me that I was trying to use to not look at myself, because I wanted to look at myself so deeply. So the drugs were actually the escape from the pain. The funny thing is I'd actually usually have very deep spiritual conversations while I was on drugs with people. Like, we all know, for those that have done it, we all know those things happen. You know, it's like we'll start a business or any sort of joke that runs with that. But I found that I was actually getting this pseudo connection through those periods. Now, I'm not promoting that kind of use, but generally, like, you know, money and drugs are amplifiers for what's going on underneath. You know, so if you're an arsehole, you get money, you'll become a bigger arsehole. My former business partner in the investment world, his arsehole level I didn't think could get any bigger, and he's still one of my best mates now, so he won't care if I say this about him. But he got magnified through the money. I didn't necessarily, my attitude didn't change too much because it was really unattractive the way that he treated people. But drugs and money only amplified my inner exploration and the drugs that would just come out. So I'd end up having these, you know, really deep introspective chats with like random women I'd picked up or, you know, prostitutes or whatever for hours at a time and just like really connecting that way. So it was a pretty interesting experience, but it got to a point where my body was like, nah, man, it's just time to go on a different path. And what I found is when I went to New Zealand, as painful as that experience was, that's what I was looking for. Like, I was fascinated by this, like fascinated by why do we dream? Why am I having precognitive dreams where I'm predicting something that's going to happen and the next day it happens? How does that happen? What's the nature of time? How is time constructed? Why is it when I'm thinking about someone that they message me? So it was really good because I got to clear all the layers out from me accepting that that's who I was. And then that just led into this work.
So, like, what did that look like being in New Zealand? Like, was it completely cutting yourself off from society? Because I can imagine it was also a very, very uncomfortable experience.
Yeah, it was very uncomfortable. Most people don't know how to be alone.
Yeah.
I'm very, very good alone. I wasn't before that, but that was the start of sort of my, I guess you could say, masculine independence. Masculinity is very independent. Femininity is a bit more dependent. Now, people might get upset with that, but I don't care. Harvard did a study for like 30 years or something on stereotypical masculine and feminine traits. Feminine traits are not necessarily independent. They're more codependent and dependent. Masculinity is independent. That's why we've got, you know, strong independent women that don't need no man.
Yeah.
So, because you're acting like a man. So it was a very difficult experience, but learning how to be with myself on my own made me powerful. I think there's, I don't know who said it, but it's like the man that can be alone is either a beast or a god. One of those two. Now, I'm not saying I'm a beast or a god, but for illustrative purposes, it's a relevant statement and quote because I was in a place where I had no friends in the middle of winter on a farm, exiled on my own. That's going to teach you some stuff. And we don't have that anymore. So I feel like that was the beginning of my rites of passage into manhood was that. And that was 8-9 years ago now. So I was just after I turned 30.
What would the equivalent of that be if you were going to give a man or a boy who's yet to step into manhood some advice around, you know, taking that next step? And we'll get into the individuation stuff in a second, but, you know, creating that rite of passage, like what would the equivalent be that you would recommend to someone? Would you tell them to do what you did or would there be something else?
I wouldn't tell everyone to do what I did because I like more of the extreme stuff. So if I'm going to go into something, I'm like, I'll do this right and I'll look it in the eye and go, let's do it. Let's go. What's the hardest thing I can look at? I don't seek those experiences out so much anymore. They're not, I've done enough of them now. So it's like doing big psychedelic sessions or something like that is not really my thing anymore. My life nowadays is a little bit more peaceful. I'm sort of like the middle of the road. It's not so extreme. So I would choose a couple of different things. I would say go and travel on your own for a while. Put yourself into difficult situations by doing that. Start a business where you don't rely on someone to help you and shoestring it, or train martial arts. It'd be one of those three that I would say that would be, because all of those seek independence, right? So martial arts, you can learn to handle yourself, so you walk differently. The funny thing is, I was talking about this with my partner, Joelle, when we're in Tokyo, and she said, do you feel safe when you walk around? I said, yeah, because I've trained for so many years. And I said, but the funny thing is when you've trained for a long time, you walk differently. So that's when you don't need it. It's kind of weird. It's like you trained enough to use it, but then you probably don't need it.
Yeah.
You just walk differently. So that's That's a sign of masculine solidarity. And then starting a business is because you learn to become resourceful in the absence of resources. So business is hard, right? Business isn't hard. Being successful is hard. It's fucking hard to be very successful. That's why less than 1% of people make more than $500,000 a year. And that's not to say that success should be defined by money, but the size of the problem you solve based on who you are will be defined by how well you get paid. That's basically it.
Yeah.
For the most part. And so you look at that and you start a business that's purpose-driven for men. So men really should be able to do that, because you should be able to make a living as a man, because if you can't commit to yourself, you can't commit to a family. I do think that family is the highest calling for a man next to purpose. I think it goes hand in hand. And, go travel alone and put yourself into difficult situations. Traveling can be overwhelming. I was just in Tokyo, and I've traveled extensively, and I was in Tokyo, and I said to Joelle, I wouldn't want to come here as my first trip. This isn't an easy city to get around. And it's not easy to deal with the people, because not many people speak English. It's not the greatest food, whatever. Some people love it. That's okay. But we could handle it because we both traveled a lot. But I'm like, this would be a really difficult city for someone that had never traveled before. It would be overwhelming. So I think all of those are a point of separation of dependency on someone. So you got the martial arts, you can depend on yourself in a situation where you might need to fight. Starting a business, you take no help. You learn to become resourceful in the absence of resources, so you become independent. And then also traveling alone, you're becoming independent. You're separating and going away. It's like the child leaving the nest, so to speak. So they're almost like gentle rites of passage. But then the big one will always come through death or a heartbreak. That will be the big one that you'll attract in either way. But those previous situations will equip you to deal with that more easily.
Yeah, I did a lot of travel in my early years, and I just I look at that, and I wouldn't say there was a lot of hard moments, but it definitely was testing.
Yeah.
And I think the word that I've always taken and over the last decade was just perspective.
Yeah.
Just going to third world countries and walking away, it's just a different perspective.
Yeah.
And it's you come home just with a whole new view, and it's gratitude over everything.
Yeah. Yeah, the third world countries in difficult, that's what I mean, difficult environments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even seeing how other people live, going to places where they live on less than $1 a day in Africa. Maybe it's $2 now, I don't know, but those are really important, especially when you're young, because it's you grow up in Sydney, Australia, or around the coast of Australia.
Yeah.
It's a soft life here. It's not hard.
It is.
It's very safe and it's very easy.
Yeah. You can tell when someone hasn't left.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I've noticed, and I've probably noticed it because it's been something that I've struggled a lot with, is your ability to pivot, in particular in the work that you're doing. And since I've known you, it's always been in the world of therapy and coaching. But just in terms of your beliefs and the paths that you take within that world, you've been able to pivot and go, I don't do that anymore. I'm going down this route. I no longer believe that, even though I said it 12 months ago.
Yep.
And this is where I'm at now. And why I say I struggle with that is because I feel like I will stay in something and be quite scared to pivot and to go down. And my world's in the content creation world. But even then it's going, well, I kind of want to go over and I want to try this now. I really struggle to pivot. And I've noticed how effortlessly you do that. How did you get to that place? And also, how has your work evolved ever since you started?
Yeah, so the two excellent questions, by the way, for that too. So my work has evolved as it's become broader. So it's become much more panoramic in its viewpoint and its expansiveness, but the fundamentals stay the same. It's language, physics, programming, the mind. So those four tenets really underlie everything in life. So there are pivots into different spaces. As I unravel myself, I then become geared towards something new. So it's not very hard for me to leave it alone, because the pivot to hold on to something, the lack of pivoting, would be an absence of adaptability. So people ask me what it takes to be successful. I'm like, you have to be adaptable. That's the most important quality. So you need to pivot, move with the times, right? And that's one of my strengths, is adaptability. So when I look at the mind, language, physics, and the human mind, these are the things that are carrying us through life. So when I start to analyze myself in deeper ways, I have more genuine insight. I go to a deeper level. That version of me that was geared to, say, chronic illness, which I worked in for a year or something like that, no longer is required to survive. And so it leaves. So I don't mind leaving it behind. So then what I do is I'll say, I'm going in a different direction now, but I'll give the reason why. And it'll always be like a solid reason as to why I'm doing it. So one of the things was when I got into masculinity, I took on the feminist movement, right, which created a lot of controversy in my life. And the controversy that it created was death threats, constant criticism, assaults from women, all that sort of stuff. And I was partaking in, exposing the feminist movement for what it is, which now, I mean, that's out there now. Like, all you got to do is go and have a look at it. But as I was looking at that as to the why, I was like, oh, I'm just using this as a way to keep fighting with my mother. And I don't mind admitting that. And that's part of the power in doing it. Mm-hmm. So I can pivot and adapt and move towards something new because I know why I left the old part behind. I'm not just monkey branching to something else out of some sense of ignorance. There's actually a reason why I was doing it and moving towards it. Now, some of my stuff still associates and refers to the feminist movement. But instead of fighting women, I'm looking to empower men and build good men back up. That movement has done more damage to women than anything else. And the women we're all seeing that now. You've got women in their 40s that are either single and unhappy. Some of them are really happy in their careers, and that's okay. If that's what you want to do, that's okay. It's not a judgment on that. But it's split families up. It's left women thinking that sexual liberation is empowerment, right? And you can do what you want. This is not about me saying you can't do it. I'm saying all of that stuff, it leaves a woman 35, 40, 45. Her options are very limited around finding a good man because of the previous history. Good men that are of quote unquote high value, they're not looking for women like that. They just aren't. That's a fact. And I'll likely get hammered for this comment, but it's still the truth. I don't mind copying the hammering if it's the truth. And it is, because statistics and environment doesn't lie. You don't go down to the beach and start looking at the natural environment saying there's something wrong with it. It's just a natural environment. But the thing is, now we're looking at women that don't like the options that they've been left with because of their own choices, because of the way that, culture has lied to them about what they should seek. And now we're seeing more of a return to traditionalism, and I'm not talking about a religious traditionalism, even though that's a bit of a flavor of the moment. I'm talking about men also being just as bad as that movement in the form of like wanting to be mothered by women, Peter Pan syndrome, not stepping up, not taking responsibility, not being committed, being overly emotional. Both sides equally contribute to the issue. It's no one's fault. It's not feminism's fault. It's not only men's fault. We've all chosen to create this. So until we start taking full responsibility, those things are not going to change. So when I talk about pivoting away from things and moving away from them, I move away from them for a reason, and I'm okay with it. I'm comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with my choices. I don't mind. So if someone doesn't have a problem with it, that's not my problem. That's their problem. And you know me, you've known me for a while now. I'm no stranger to controversy. Or being polarizing, but the truth is polarizing. And I always say, one of my quotes is, the truth hurts when you believe your own lies. That's why. So if it affects you in some way, that's because you're lying about something. A trigger is usually a lie. That's the thing. So it's like someone might say something, you'll get offended. The offense is that like either this is something within you and you're trying to blame them, that's the lie, rather than taking responsibility for it. So the pivoting is, or let's say the adaptability. When you go through it, your soul knows when you need to go to a new thing, but because my work unravels the identity and dissolves the identity, I can't continue down a path where that identity no longer exists because that version of me is now gone. So I'm quite comfortable in the way that I move through things. And through that, I've also realized how impermanent life is. And things change, man. People come and go. People die. People are born. That's life. And until you really sit in that properly, you can't really live life to its fullest.
What does that adaptability or what does it feel like before you know when to adapt? So what is the symptom?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a emptiness. It's an emptiness that I feel that's not like when I'm full, I'm in authenticity. So I think loneliness is an absence of authenticity. I don't actually believe loneliness exists. How could we be lonely when there's millions of people around us at all times? It's an internal experience of isolation. And what loneliness is an isolation of self that's been exiled, which is our authentic and true self. When you're authentic, you feel full because you're in integrity. Integrity comes from the root word, which means wholeness. When we're out of integrity, we're fractured, right? An integer is a whole number. A fraction is part of a number, right? So when we're fractured, when we haven't put the pieces together, when we're not whole, there's parts of us that have been isolated. That's where we feel lonely because we're not authentic. And so when I start to need to pivot, that emptiness comes back because I'm not being authentic. So when I'm inspired comes from the Latin word in spirit. I feel full. So when I'm full, I'm satisfied, I'm driven, motivated, I've got heaps of energy. When that starts to dissipate or die off, or I'm meant to pivot or move or adapt into a different place, or part of my identity's been moving, it feels like grief because it's a heaviness, it's a loneliness, it's an emptiness. That's why when you grieve the death of someone, you feel empty because you don't know who you are without them. So it's a similar way. We just go through deaths of ourselves as opposed to the death of someone else. That's the symptom of it. That's the symptomatic approach. So it's emptiness, it's heaviness, it's feeling weighed down.
Yeah.
And that's like a grieving of self. So you can put the load down, so you can let it go. So the heaviness goes, you feel light again, and then you start to get inspired again. I've had this many times in this work.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like when I think about it, it's almost like, yeah, you just like you feel tired too.
Yeah.
Like fatigued.
Yep.
Like it's just like it's a drag.
Yeah.
Like, and to drag is to, it's a lot of weight.
Yep.
So, yeah, interesting. So let's dive into the core of your work, which you spoke about earlier, the process of individuation. And I've heard you speak about this a lot, and I still have questions.
Sure.
So I want to take it to its fundamentals, which is, what is it?
It's the process to wholeness. Individuation comes from individual. Individual means indivisible, which means I'm undivided internally. It can be a lifelong journey. I think the most important parts are splitting from the mother and father. So I think there's internal structures that are created or what you've inherited over what's inherent, which is your true self. And then you start to play a character. And then the ego is a collector of programs. So we switch on these programs that make us think the way that we are is our true self. And so what it is, it's about the dissolution of the subconscious defense mechanisms. So it could be, there's unconscious, which is your soul. That's meant to come into consciousness. The subconscious is the layer above that, which defends that and holds that through projection, perception, prisons, programming, and problems, which are the negative emotional addictions in the form of sabotage. So, and that might sound a little complicated for people, but think of it like a jail. Your soul is being kept in a jail, and the perimeter around the jail is your subconscious, and you got to break out of that. And it's very, very, very well defended. That's the thing. It's like, have you seen the movie Inception?
Yeah.
You know where he goes down the layers in the final one, and the final, not the final layer, but the layer is the snowmobiles that's super well defended, and they have to break into that.
Sure. Yeah.
That's like what it's like. It's very well defended. There's psychological defense mechanisms that are there to keep your soul trapped. But the thing is, life is always going to bring in what you're trying to learn so you can break out. So life is going to try to pull the soul out. The ego is going to try to push the soul down. That's the thing. And so it's about the integration of these undivided parts. And when we start to exile out these parts of ourselves, it's where we feel lonely. That's the absence of authenticity. And the individuation process is to wholeness. That's all it is. And so as we start to move towards wholeness, it's about removing what's in the way of that, not becoming something. It's about unbecoming who we were to allow who we are to emerge. It's an emergent experience. And that can be through any number of ways. It's like through rites of passage when you're very young, but that's catalyzed on splitting from the mother. There's dependency on safety and security to become an independent, indivisible, whole human being without needing to please anyone, without needing to be at the whim of what society tells you who you think you should be, or better yet, who you think you're, or who you're not, right? It's like, you're not good enough, you're not tall enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not strong, whatever bullshit we get sold. So the individuation process is the path to wholeness. And when you get there, because I know you're probably going to ask me, how do you know if you get there? That's when the bridge between the head and the heart collapses, which is the throat. So you're fully expressed without any distortion that makes you stop wanting to say what you need to say. So it's fully expressed and in full acceptance of all your imperfections and all your flaws. And it's like you make space for that to emerge, and you're okay with that. That's why the adaptability that we were talking about and pivoting, I'm okay with to leave those parts behind and to fully own everything I've done, said, people I've hurt, people I've helped. I'm okay with that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm cool with this. And it doesn't mean that I would do it again, or I'm cool with the people I hurt, but I understand that it's a part of life, and none of it's personal. None of it's personal. I wish everyone would get this. It's like, even if you hurt someone, it's usually out of a place of unconsciousness, because if you were conscious, you wouldn't do it, but you need to hurt someone to become conscious so you don't do it again, right? And then as you go through that, you go, okay, I'm not going to repeat this, or you can apologize. You can say, look, I'm sorry that I hurt you, but I'm also I'm not sorry for my decision I had to make, which the result was the hurt, because I needed to learn that way and I wouldn't do it again. You know, I use the example of my previous relationship. That thing was very difficult, but through being in relationship with her, she freed me to now be with the beautiful woman that I'm with. So without her, I wouldn't have been led to this. I got nothing but gratitude for her. And, you know, she made my life quite difficult, but I also chose to stay in it.
Sure.
So there's self-responsibility, saying, I chose you for this reason. You helped me complete the task to wholeness that I needed to get to. Thank you for that. I have no ill will towards anyone in my past. No one whatsoever. If you're blaming someone that someone did something to you, or they hurt you, or whatever, short of it being a physical violation, I'm talking about emotional or something like that, you're being a victim because you chose to be in relationship with that person. Take some responsibility for it, because if you don't take responsibility, you're just a victim, and you can't individuate effectively while you're being a victim.
Well, yeah, it's my second question. Is it about splitting from both parents or one?
It's mainly the mother. If you're raised by a father with no mother, you're going to have to split from the father at some point. But it's mainly the mother. Otherwise, if the mother doesn't let you split, she's going to become a devouring mother. What we've got in society, which I haven't heard anyone else talk about yet, and maybe it's out there, I don't know. We talk about smashing the patriarchy. Patriarchy just means led by the father. But as this has happened, what's been created is a collective devouring mother, where we see this in the war on masculinity at the moment. That all that wants to happen is this dark feminine counterpart wants to destroy masculinity. That's all it wants to do. You can't destroy something that's fundamental to nature. You can try to transform it, but it'll always take its natural course, which we're kind of seeing that now. It's kind of the pendulum swinging the other way. But a devouring mother is just as unhealthy as a, conquering patriarchy that wants to destroy everyone. But there's a quote, I think it's Aristotle: masculine republics give way to feminine democracies, and feminine democracies give way to tyranny. So we look at the state of the world at the moment. This devouring mother that's been created wants to devour masculinity. That is the same way as a mother that won't let her son go. That's the thing. And so the parent has to offer the child up to the world to reach its potential. Our society doesn't want men to be in their potential at all. We have a lot of women saying, I fell in love with potential. Then the man either reaches his potential and then gets rid of her. So you have to look to where you're going with that and the attributes of that, because the mother's usually going to be the one that wants to hold on to the child more than anything else. And we see this in abusive family systems. They create the golden child, the lost child, the black sheep, and the enabler. That's to make sure the children don't leave the home. And that's part of the individuation process. And in fact, healing from narcissistic abuse, in the individuation process, is the way to heal that.
What comes up for me when I hear the individuation process, when I've heard you speak about it, and even now, even though it has nothing to do with anything that you've said, for me it feels like there's a negative connotation to like pushing the mother away.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel a lot of resistance come up for me when I hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also know that that's resistance to then go and actually do that. So what is the reality of it? Like, what does it look like for someone to go through that process? And what does the relationship look like with the mother on the other side of that?
Yeah, two good questions. So the first thing is like you're going to, whether you want to do it or not, you're going to attract in a woman that's going to make you do it.
Mm.
And she's not going to come to you consciously and go, all right, Andrew, we're going to get into the individuation process now. It's not going to happen that way. So it used to get done from rites of passage.
Mm.
Boys that'd be 7, 8, 9 years old, taken from the mother with the men through some difficult event or circumstance. That doesn't happen anymore. If anything, it's the opposite. The mother coddles the boy and makes him weaker and effeminate and focus on feelings and all that sort of stuff. So if you don't do it like when you're young, life is going to set you up to do it in a relationship.
Mm.
So it's not really about whether you want to do it or not. It's when are you going to do it and how are you going to face it. And so what that looks like now is because those rites of passage don't exist anymore, nature adapted and then started to bring in and make relationships be the portal for which you do it. Now, pop psychology only reinforces the absence of splitting from the mother. So it's become, you look at relationships now, they're more toxic and they're worse than they've ever been. Mm. Like the nature of our relational capacity at the moment is terrible. Mm. It's horrible. It's a bunch of childlike adults that are therapists saying that we should keep reinforcing childlike psychology. And don't spend, you need to meet my needs and you don't make me feel safe and whatever long list of, ridiculous statements that have been made out there. So much so, like I saw something the other day by Jillian to Jackie, whatever her name is. There's very much a strong pandering to effeminate men in that on her page. And she was trying to define what a high value man is. And she said, a high value man is someone that is emotionally available, something along those lines. I was mind blown because that is a devouring mother. Mm. The mother doesn't get to turn the child or the man into a man, to man psychology. Men do that. Mm. Men define what a high value man is. Women don't get to do that. That's not how it is. And she was saying that the way a man becomes high value is to become more like a woman. That's a devouring mother. That's a devouring mother statement. That is, no, I'm not going to let you honor your true masculine traits. I'm going to, and I'm also I'm not saying the Andrew Tate side of money and cars and all that is high value male either. No, it's certainly what you can produce in the world and being useful is part of becoming a high value male. Success comes with that. Financial success comes with that. Material gain comes with that. That's part of the provision we live in the world. So yes, that's an attribute, but it's not the only attribute. So what it looks like is we have to actually start to identify what's keeping us trapped, for starters. And it's accounts like that and women like that are not letting men grow into their full authentic masculinity. What it is bow to the sort of programming that we need to be more like malfunctioning women. That's how men are treated, like malfunctioning women, in order to become men. And that's a psychological, it's a psyop essentially. Mm. So what does it look like? It looks like now dissolving the programming in the subconscious that have been activated by your parents that make you act like your parents. So we through mirroring, what we do is we become like our mother or our father. What happens is we have to dissolve those constructs. And then what happens on the other side of that, you become undivided and whole, but you rebuild the internal structures so you learn to be boundaried around your mother. So most mothers that don't allow their child to individuate have no boundaries with them. None whatsoever. And you'll find that boundaries only ever affect people that want to control you. Mm. Like if someone says to me, I'm not cool with that, I'll go, I apologize. I can see why that happened and I respect that. I won't do it again. I had that, I was bantering with a mate a few months ago. I took it too far and he was like, man, I didn't like that. That pissed me off. And I said, I'm so sorry, dude. I'd never do that intentionally. I'll never bring it up again. And I've never brought it up again. That's okay with someone having boundaries when someone's healthy. So what we have to do is we have to build internal boundaries around it. Your mother, once you turn, I think 16, but 18, should have no part in your decision-making as a male. None. And if you have a woman come into your life that you want to marry, your mother goes to the bottom of the list, right? Absolutely, like no question about it. Your wife comes first, then your children and your relationship. And if she wants to intervene with dawn raids or whatever, dawn raids are where she rocks up at the house at 6 a.m. and starts doing shit, washing your clothes, if you're, leaving your kids with her all the time, if you're sleeping at her house, so if she's cooking your food, you haven't individuated, and that absolutely needs to happen. And whether you want to do it or not, nature will make sure you do it because that's what we're supposed to do. So what the relationship looks like after that is, like I said, putting the mother to the bottom of the list, having boundaries around her. You choose your wife or your partner over her every single time, and she has no influence over the relationship. She runs to your schedule, you don't run to hers. And if that means that she needs to be out of your life for unlimited contact, you got to make that decision.
What's your definition and view on healthy masculinity, and where has society gone wrong with it?
It's interesting because if we have to ask what's healthy masculinity, it implies there's a version that's unhealthy, right? So we need to look at what's unhealthy first in order to see the byproduct of what's healthy. So I see it as like masculinity needs to be solid. Masculinity is about solidity. It's about discipline. It's about structure. It's about containment. The masculine contains containment, containment, containment. This is what healthy masculinity is. The antithesis to that is a lack of containment. It's to spill out. It's to be uncontained. I don't know if that's a word, but lack of containment's better. So it's to be like spilling out all the time, hyper emotional. Also, the other side of that is to be completely shut down too, right? It's an inability to face yourself. It's blaming. It's expecting to go 50-50 with your woman. Like any man that goes 50-50, I find it very difficult to respect them, right? Or is like hyper controlling around finances, or doesn't want to provide, or treats their woman like a mother. These are the unhealthy traits. If you want to talk about toxic masculinity, it's this, right? I don't like the term toxic masculinity, but the unhealthy boy psychological traits are that which try to make the woman like a mother. We're meant to provide as men. When your biology is in the right format for a man, you will get so much satisfaction out of providing for a woman. Like, it fills me up with purpose and I feel useful. You should want to, at all times, feel useful in the world. When you've got, excuse me, when you've got people to look after, to take care of, that rely on you, you are useful. It pushes you into a place where you have to put yourself aside and go, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take care of this woman plus my children. You become useful in the world. A man's biology is meant to be used to be useful. That's what it is. So healthy masculinity is become fucking useful in the world. Do something that matters. Go after it and take care of people and take on as much responsibility as possible. That's healthy masculinity. Unhealthy masculinity is ones that, like I said, seek to make the woman the mother, don't commit, they don't make a living for themselves, they're not driven to, they fold in the face of adversity like a deck chair. It's like, I don't want to go to work, or I can't do this, I can't handle it, this is all too much, and, you need to hold space for me. Like, as a man, like, you don't ask your woman to hold space for you. As much as they say, I want to hold space for you and you can bring anything to me, that's rubbish. Don't do that. I can tell you from working with thousands of men, do not do that. It ruins the polarity. They lose respect for you. The only women that will really want you to do that are ones that are only looking through the lens of self-preservation because their father was probably very unstable and they just want to know where you're at all times because they couldn't predict their environment growing up. So it becomes this sort of like, the emotional availability thing is really interesting because I get a lot of women say in my Q&As, my man's not emotionally available. And usually it only takes me 2 or 3 questions to dismantle it for them. And I go, what does that mean? They're like, oh, he's not open with his feelings, etc., etc. I'm like, okay. And I ask this question, does he get angry? They go, yeah. I'm like, okay, so he is emotionally available. You just don't like the emotion that he's available for. And they're like, oh my God, I never thought about it that way. I'm like, no, you want your man to sit there and cry and gossip and talk to you like a woman. You're trying to turn him into a woman. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to be completely emotionally unavailable. Like, if I'm working through something, I just say to my partner, I go, I'm just going through something at the moment, babe. I got to go out and sort of handle it. But I'll be back soon. I'm feeling a bit internal. I don't want to talk right now. And that, it's not very often. If something comes up, I'll go, this is what's going on for me and I don't know why. I just need to let you know. That's it. And she's amazing at like handling any of that stuff as I am with her. We've never even had a fight. So it's like, we have excellent conflict resolution because we know we're on the same team. So there's no inverted construct that's trying to play out. And so the fact of the matter is like the reason why healthy masculinity is a topic at the moment is because unhealthy masculinity is ruling the day. And you were in my course with this, the masculinity course. And I looked at, I can't remember the name of the group, but they said the 10 traits of healthy masculinity. And there was the long-term study on Harvard. Actually, should I get my book and find this?
Yeah.
And go through it? Yeah. So relative to healthy masculinity, and we look at traits of unhealthy masculinity, right? And where this came from. When I was looking at this, I discovered a list of healthy masculine traits. And there were 10 main components on here, right? And I read these components and these traits, and what I saw was, I said, this isn't masculinity that they're talking about here. I can't remember the name of the group because this was about 2 years, I think we did this in. But what I also found, and this study is difficult to find now, was Harvard did a long-term study. I think it was 26 or 28 years, and I think it was 33,000 people. So it was big numbers, long enough. And they had the stereotypical traits of masculinity and femininity, right? Harvard University. So I found this group, and I think you can Google it and still find it. But healthy masculinity, the 10 tenets of healthy masculinity. 1, embracing and expressing a full range of emotion. I mean, I put in brackets here that I wrote it was, well, except anger, of course. You know, we don't want that. 2, validating the feelings of others. 3, being willing to cry. 4, being vulnerable and asking for help. 5, valuing the lives of girls and women. 6, treating all people equally. No competition, right? I'm going to get into these individually as well, by the way. 7, never using control or violence. 8, never use gender-based attributes to bully or discriminate. The fact that this statement, a discriminatory statement, is on a list of healthy masculinity is discriminatory in its nature by being on a list only for healthy masculinity. I've found that like bullying and discrimination, the worst I've ever copped is from women online. I rarely ever cop it from men. I rarely see men doing it. It's mainly done by women. And number 9, never use language to denigrate women and girls. 10, having an interest in women and girls outside of sex. Having female friends and mentors, express emotions freely, and become nurturing and validate feelings. This was a men's group that wrote this, by the way. A men's group. I can't remember the name of it. I wish I had it now. Now, we get into the Harvard study of stereotypical masculine and feminine traits. So everyone just sort of listened to that last bit. Stereotypical feminine traits. Nurturing. That's the number 1 trait. Agreeable. Collaborative. Seek mentors that are women and teachers. Collaborative. Adjusting. Modest. Emotional. I think 8 or 9 of those are based on emotions. Emotional. Warm. Restrained, anti-competition, interdependent, relational, other promotional, patient, connected, follower, context dependent, humble. This list of healthy masculinity is a trait of stereotypical femininity. Now we'll read the Harvard list of stereotypical masculine traits. Assertive, self-reliant, competitive, influencing, confident, analytical, brilliant, decisive, independent, self-promotional, risk-taker, separate, leader, context-independent, and bold. So context-independent is I live life on my terms. Context-dependent is I'm more susceptible to social and cultural programming. So if you look at that list, like these traits, you can see that what's happened is there's been a complete inversion of healthy masculinity versus unhealthy masculinity. The literal list of healthy masculine traits are stereotypical feminine traits. Like that was pretty shocking when I found that. And it wasn't just some study that was written up on a blog post. This was done by Harvard it was either 26 or 33 years. So if you want to look at what unhealthy masculinity is, become like a woman.
What do we all want? Like, what's on the other side of all the personal development, all the books, all the courses, all of the internal work, all of the retreats and the travel and the like what is the thing that we're chasing on the other side of that?
I think that would be different for men and women.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can only answer for me and what I've seen with all the people I worked with. What people want is freedom. Freedom from suffering.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Freedom from conflict, freedom from repetitive patterns. But what I see is the people that go in to free themselves of that, the satisfaction is going into the difficulty to then be free from the difficulty. I think we're all looking for peace and love on some level, which is a sense of belonging. But I think freedom comes from authenticity. And authenticity is like this absence of distortion about who you are or where you're going. And I think that's a beautiful thing to get to. Does it last forever? Don't know. Nothing lasts forever. But, well, in this physical realm anyway, maybe something happens after this. I don't know. I can't be sure of it. But I think everyone just wants to be deeply authentic and deeply accepted. And I think there's real freedom in that to be, even saying stuff like I just did then. Not a lot of people would feel the freedom internally to say that, to challenge the norms and confront it. And it's not coming from a hateful place or a difficult place for me or anything like that. It's just the facts. And I look at that and I'm like, it doesn't matter if someone gets triggered by that because I'm free internally, so I don't get upset by it, but I'll still confront someone with the truth of it. I have no problem with that. Like I said earlier, women that hate men and disrespect masculinity are defective. Don't waste your time with them. Like, I've got no problem saying that. And men that hate women and want to denigrate women, don't waste your time with them. I'd be celebrated for the latter, but demonized for the former. But it's the same thing. So when you're internally free and authentic, you can stand for something that is a little more difficult than what most people wouldn't take on like I do, because I'm comfortable there, because it doesn't affect me. I don't lose sleep over it. And so when we have this freedom, I think that's what we're looking for, is that freedom internally to be fully self-expressed, not necessarily to say everything right, to be okay that I've said everything right based on what's true for me. And that doesn't mean true from a moral relativism place that anything is true at all times. It's like, no, it's the truth of what's going on in the world. And I think that's really important.
So what's next? Because the work that you're doing now, you work with people one-on-one, individually, in a very sometimes intense way.
It's all intense.
And I think that's, everything's reflective of that. I think you've positioned what you do in the way that you present the things that you talk about, even what it takes to work with you financially as well. Like, it is a very different style, and I can personally kind of attest to that. But very well worth it. Then you've been working with other coaches for a while, but you specifically started a container for coaches to help them understand your work more deeply. So what's next? Like, where are you heading?
It's a good question. So I still do a little bit of one-on-one work, not much. For me, it's more about teaching how to do this work, because I think, you've seen and worked with me, the results are super quick and they're rapid. Most people find me when they've tried everything else and nothing else really works. And it's like, I'm more like what did someone call me years ago? Something like a pit bull or something like that. It's like the pit bull for the psyche or something like that, where I just go in and I get after it. And it's like, that's it. That's why I don't work with people for very long. And I think it's a much more masculine approach to the work. I'm not going to sit there. I talk most of the time. Like 80% of the time I'm talking in a session, because I'm excavating and I'm pulling things out of people. You've seen me pivot, and you saw me in a session yesterday where I was doing a breakdown with someone and going, this is what this is. This is how I got here. This is what you've got to do here. And just blowing past the walls of the defense mechanisms and getting around them. I think I use the term trapdoors. There's trapdoors in our psyche that you can access to get to the root really quickly. So it's about teaching that, because I've seen now with 6,000 or whatever, how many thousands of people I've worked with, that this method works. It's very powerful. And it's been something that I want to teach to others, because if you know how to get to the root quickly, you save people a lot of suffering and a lot of years to get there. And I think most people are just sort of trimming the branches of their issues, whereas I'm like, let's just rip it out at the fucking root. That's the way I do it. So what's next? Teaching my method. I want to train 100,000 people in it. That's what I want to do, because if you can, one guy that I've trained, Max, he's like booked out at the moment, and he's only been doing it for like 6 to 8 months or something like that, maybe longer, or maybe closer to a year now. I can't remember. He's got so many people he's working with now, and he's out there and he's doing it. And everyone that I've coached is having these levels of success where they're instantly becoming good at the work, successful, making money from it. It's like it just transitions straight into it. So I would like to help as many people as possible. Train 100,000 coaches to help as many people as possible. So it could be, 100,000 coaches help 5,000 people. I think that's 500 million people affected by my work. That would be pretty good. I'd take 50 million, but whatever's meant to be will be. And so that's really what I want, because me doing it on my own is great, but it's about me giving the gifts away now to people to say, this is how you do it. This is where you go with it. You can be part of the individuation process. As a result of that, we'll see relationships change, families come back online, healthier children. People ask me, what's my legacy? And I'm like, healthy children. That's it. It's like, I just want to leave this world better than how I left it. Leave this world better than how I was brought into it. And I don't want my kids to ever even understand what it was like the way that I grew up. And so healthy children is the legacy that I want to leave, with my work being used out there to help others, to excavate people into authenticity, and not people running around in their trauma, acting like a victim all the time. And that's with respect to people that have had serious trauma. It's more of just like a broad stroke, because the most powerful thing is I could be a victim based on how I grew up, and I was for a while. There's no freedom in that world. There's nothing satisfying about it, being a victim around your circumstances. On some level, that was it. And yeah, it's like, I said to myself, get the fuck over it. Just get over it and get on with life and just do it. And sometimes that can be very healing, where you just go, you know what? I'm not letting this affect me anymore. I'm done with it. I'm tired of it. Like, shut the fuck up to yourself, and you just get on with it. And now that's not everyone's path. And I have real sympathy, because I've worked with some really extreme cases of trauma. I'm working with a couple of women at the moment, super powerful and courageous women. And they're just so like, I'm facing myself. And I've got so much respect for people like that. And they're the people that I want now out there using my work, that have been through it, that, that have suffered and experienced things, that they can literally sit there and say, no, I've been through this and I know how to heal it because I've been through it. There's a lot of textbook psychologists out there, textbook therapists, that have done 3/5 of fuck all in the world of difficult experiences. They're not my people. They have their people, and that's cool. But the people that have been through it, everything that I essentially teach, I've been through. Now, I got slammed a few times because I do a relationship course, and people are like, yeah, but you're not in a relationship. I'm like, yeah, see, that's your myopic thinking. It's about the relationship to yourself. And it's also about dealing and healing from abusive relationships. I'm not telling people how to be married. I haven't been married, so I don't teach that. I don't teach women how to be women. I'm not a woman. So despite what cultural norms allow these days as to what is a woman and all of that, I don't teach that. It's like, men don't often tell women how to be women either. Not the ones that I see, but there's a lot of women telling men how to be men. Women don't know how to be men. I don't know how to be a woman, and I wouldn't disrespect the feminine by doing that. And so I think it's an important part when you're doing this work, is that you've done and earned it. Like, that's, I was saying to my partner Joelle the other day, I said, the thing is about my work and my success, I've fucking earned it. No one gave it to me, and every single part of it I've earned. So if someone's like, oh, I don't think you make as much money as you say, or like, you're not as successful as you make out, I'm like, I don't give a fuck, because I know where I'm at. And I'm okay with it, because I earned every fucking cent that I've got and everything that I've got. No one can take that away from me. No one will ever be able to take it away from me. And those are the people that I like. I love and respect those people so much, that like, I dug in, I got it done, I faced myself, and this is where I'm at. And I want to go into the world and help people. Those are the best coaches. They're the best ones for sure. So that's what's next.
Awesome. Just earlier you spoke about like the way that you work and the reference of the people and just like getting after it. But I the session that we were in yesterday, as we're recording this, but also I've watched the whole recording of the case study that you were using, and it was very eye-opening. Very intense case, very, very good case study, but very, very intense in her story. And what I noticed was the way that you dealt with it was as things were coming up and as she was talking about these stories, which were for majority of people incomprehensible, the way that you dealt with it was just streamlined. It wasn't bought into the story. It wasn't trying to sympathize or have compassion or nurture or, validate. It stayed the path of, we're getting through this.
Yeah.
How do you do that, and why do you choose to take that path?
Yeah, because the thing is, like, in those experiences where people have got the big trauma, there's one thing to validate it, but what I validate too is how fucking powerful that person is. I'm like, you're so much bigger than this and you don't even see it yet. Plus, I know where I'm taking them. I know what's on the other side of it. So I know that if I'm wrapping them up in sympathy and softness and all this sort of stuff, I'm not your guy if you want to work through that sort of stuff. Like, go to a normal therapist, they'll be great with that. And I've worked with some incredible therapists myself that have been like that, and that's what I've needed at the time. So it's really not a diss towards that.
Yeah.
When people come to me with, the dark trauma, the hard stuff, I'm like, you've survived this, you can survive me. And that's not like a military aspect where I'm like, you fucking piece of shit and you need to get this, blah, blah, blah. Right? So for the people listening, it's not like that. It's more I'm unshaken by the effects of what that person has been through. So I don't sit there and go, oh my God, I can't believe that. Like, I'm non-reactive to it. So there's two things with that. It's like, there's a time for the feminine, which is the softness and the nurturing. There's a time for the masculine, which is like, all right, you're fucking incredible and I can see it. Now let's get this shit done. And that's why, like, if you're out in a war zone, you don't want someone sitting there cuddling your feelings or like, saying it's going to be okay. It's like, shut up, get up, let's go. This is where we're going and I'm leading you into this and I know where to go. You saw in that session where I was like, let's take a step back because I could see some overwhelm. But then, like, I looped around into being able to free her from what was going on for her. So I'm still gentle in my approach, but I'm still very direct in the way that I do it because I know what's required in that moment. If I go too soft, and there are some times where I am much more gentle and it requires that. But you don't come to me to get validation for victimhood. You come to me to destroy the victim and make you remember how fucking powerful you are. Because if you can survive those incidences, getting through it is easy. It just looks difficult because the ego will throw up defenses to make sure it stays there. And that woman's been through a lot. And I know what she's capable of and how strong and capable she is. I'm going to treat her as such. I'm going to treat her where I see her, which is like a powerful, capable, extraordinary being. And I can see that. And you can see that in the evidence of the way I speak it. I bring her back to the thing. I'm like, where is it? What's going on? Like that. It's very sort of fatherly in a way. It's like a fatherly energy, which is what I bring into the sessions, which I think is one of my biggest assets as well.
Man, thank you. Yeah, like I said at the start, like, we've been on a journey together. We'll continue to go on a journey together. And yeah, it's the work that you do is second to none. And the fact that you're now teaching it to other people, I think, is extremely powerful.
Testament to you too, man. I've seen the changes in you since we first met, and I think you're in your car and we were talking about how it was difficult for you to leave a relationship. I think that was was that the first one that we did? Or
it was.
Yeah. I think that was it, hey, like 3-4 years ago. To where you've gone from there to now, like, you wouldn't even waste my time with something like that because you got that shit handled.
Yeah.
So testament to you and the courage you do as well, man. So it's been a pleasure to go on the journey with you, man, truly. I have a lot of respect for you.